I love this movie. It was fantastic. It's about an Filipino immigrant named Elizabeth Keithley who faces deportation after she mistakenly votes on a K-3 visa. Arian, you wrote the script for the courtroom. You used real court transcripts. Talk a little bit about gathering all of that information and putting it into a cohesive script.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real kind of crazy experiment in which I don't think any of us thought it might even work out. But I was just, after the events of, of what was happening on the border with children in the summer of 2018, I just wanted to read a bunch of deportation transcripts, as you do. And as I was reading this one, I just realized, maybe subconsciously, that there was something really captivating about this story, especially if we could just stick to the words that were in these transcripts, knowing full well that there was like errors inside of these transcripts because no one can transcribe perfectly, and it just kind of worked out in this beautiful, kind of magical, almost theatrical way that it has this like perfect 3-act structure. And really the majority of the work, I think, that I remember spending, as I've been thinking about this from a few years back, was actually the beginning of it. I remember that there was so much ways that you can start this piece, but I just wanted to get right into the meat of things. So a lot of it was just trying to really structure it in a way that felt very tense, and very, fast in a weird way. Even though it's transcripts of like legal information, I really thought that we should try to get into Elizabeth Keithley's head as soon as possible. So that's kind of how it happened.
Lee, the two of you brought this to the stage prior to bringing it to the screen. As a first-time film director, what were some of the challenges of taking it from stage to screen?
Well, there were some interesting challenges, but also some really incredible opportunities. It was amazing, as not having made a film before, to work with the cast of actors who almost entirely had done the stage production. So they had said the words so many times, and we had this incredible development process of working on the script together and, cutting things, reinstating things with Arian, and then like thinking about crafting the scene work and the kind of like overall arc of the storytelling. So they had such an incredibly deep relationship to the material. And going in to film it, that was a huge asset for me, particularly as a first-time film director, because it gave me so much room to focus on the camera work. And I would say the biggest like kind of conceptual thing that we grappled with was, in theater, there's a kind of understanding that what you're watching is a fiction. You kind of are suspending your disbelief. And we were playing with that in terms of making this a reenactment, to say we're reenacting something that happened in real life. And in the theater, there were all these like specific things to the theater medium that we were doing. So it's translating to the film. I thought, on film, we're so accustomed to watching procedural crime, legal dramas. How can we disrupt a little bit of people's way of watching that kind of familiar genre to highlight that these are real words and that this is actually has this underpinning of almost like a documentary kind of level to it. And so ironically, when we did the theater production, we were actually like on location, like we would perform in real courtrooms. So there were no scenic changes. We did all 3 courtrooms in the same location and just kind of like creative staging. And so where normally you would maybe go to film, like in a real courtroom, we actually built these like partial sets for the film and specifically kind of conceptualized that visual language for the film as a way to kind of create this like tension for the viewer of like wanting to get lost in the emotion of the story, but then be reminded that these are real words and actually this isn't kind of like a typical courtroom drama. So those were some of the interesting questions that we were grappling with.
Well, Arian, you talked a little bit about 2018 and with the ICE detainment centers and the 4 years of attacks on immigration and the recent replacement theories and immigrants voting, the threats of immigrants voting that we hear all the time. basically propaganda. I'm sure there are thousands of stories that you hear about that you think all of us should be aware of. Why was Elizabeth the one that you narrowed in on and thought this is the one for me that I'm going to turn this into a script and take it to the stage and then screen?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I find that the story of Elizabeth Keithley told through the lens of Richard Haynes, the lawyer that represents her, to be really complicated, incredibly messy. There is no right or wrong. At the end of the day, she shouldn't have voted, whether it was a mistake or she. And so I find those types of stories more exciting for audiences to kind of grapple with how they feel about things, instead of seeing things that I think will preach more to a choir. I don't remember how many I read, but the vast majority of the ones that I read were actually DUI charges. And a seventh DUI, to be honest, you should be deported. I mean, you shouldn't have 3, much like 7. And they've given them chances, and you can tell. And so to me, there was no like drama there. And also I felt, even though I don't know that person that was going through that thing, I felt like there was not much gray there. But with Elizabeth Keithley's story, it's so much gray. She herself is a captivating person. And also, I thought Richard Haynes's arguments in the closing arguments of the first trial, I just feel are a version of America that I think we all love and admire, but we, for some odd reason, don't go towards because we're scared of or something. And I really find that argument that he makes at the end, not just the legal argument, but the emotional argument that he makes, is a little bit of what I think as an immigrant we think of. We put America on that track to be one day or again. And so in a way, I feel those are kind of the reasons why I thought the story was just so captivating. And I'm, that first section where they're like talking about, can she speak English? Can she not speak English in front of her? I can't tell you how real that feels to me and immigrants that have seen the play version, and hopefully the ones that see the film version because they relate to that, because that happens all the time. To my family members, to people that don't speak English, they're talking around them. And I think it's important that people realize that that's happening to them so that they don't do it in the future. And I think this case has so many of those little micro moments that I think are really talk to a bigger macro story.
As a viewer, as soon as that part happened, I had this tremendous fear for her because I knew what was coming. And I just felt, oh my gosh, someone please step in for her because she needs a voice. Lee, whereas the dialogue kind of lives in this this jargon, this legal jargon, the heart of the movie beats in the performances. The courtroom is, this very restrained atmosphere, but you managed to tell a story beyond that with these like subtle, fearful looks with Elizabeth. She's clenching her hands in parts. You zoomed in when you were trying to read the emotions on her face, and it definitely felt like when her lawyer, Mr. Haynes, could barely catch their breath. I could feel that when he was trying to fight the justice system, and it was making him or her exasperated. And the court didn't have the patience or the empathy that I think the viewer was hoping that they would have. Talk a bit about working with the actors and what you wanted out of their performances.
Well, that's such an awesome question. Thank you. I mean, I was really interested in the idea that, particularly for the immigration lawyer, for Richard Haynes, that this was, of course, every case is particular, but that this is a person who lives and breathes immigration cases and who, like Rich Haynes speaks about his clients with such depth and connection and empathy. And also he's been doing it for 25 years. And so he's not shocked by what is happening. He's affected, he's passionate, he's engaged, he's rigorous in his details, but he's not shocked. And so I was really interested in like, how do we tell the story, the emotional story of this immigration lawyer who like, this is their world. Like, you know, Arian and I sat and watched some immigration deportation proceedings early on in the process of making play. And it was so formative, because such a formative experience to watch those proceedings, those real life proceedings, because there's actually this like incredible banality and kind of like mundane energy that is then contrasted with what you're talking about with Elizabeth Keithley, where her whole family's life is on the line. She has a brand new baby, you know, who was born in this country. And she's developed this incredible relationship with her stepdaughter, who is like dependent on her as like a mother figure in this like new way. So the complexity of those different emotional dynamics of the judge and Richard Haynes and the DHS lawyer being in these kinds of proceedings day in and day out. Not that I'm saying they're desensitized to it, but it's completely different, your relationship to it, you know, with that. And then versus what Elizabeth Keithley is going through and the emotion, and also how she's trying to hold it together in the midst of this experience. So I really wanted to capture a non-sensationalist, much closer to real life version of how that actually goes. And it was a little bit scary, honestly, because like Arian was saying, that Richard Haynes speech at the end, the closing argument, is actually so profound and beautiful. But, you know, then like realizing like the real thing in court is he doesn't have that exactly prepared. I mean, he knows the things that he wants to say, but he also has to respond to what's happened in the proceedings. And so he doesn't have a prepared speech. So I wanted to capture the like human experience of a lawyer who's passionate about the law, passionate about fighting for his clients, and trying to figure out what to say in that moment under pressure when like you're responsible for like whether or not how well this person's case goes. So I was interested in like those kind of stranger, mundane levels that wouldn't necessarily manifest in the performances the way we think of some of like the truly like amazing courtroom drama performances, but that tend to be a little bit more heightened.
Yeah, you know, I thought you did that brilliantly. I thought there was definitely a visual division between the mundane kind of rote behaviors of the law and then the trauma that she was facing and what could happen. You felt that through their behaviors. I really enjoyed that part of it. Arian, I would imagine building a character from court transcripts can be limiting for a writer. Were you able to talk with the Keithleys, the family, before or while you were working on the script to kind of get an idea of who they were beyond the transcripts?
One of the amazing things that the answer to your question is yes. Elizabeth Keithley, John Keithley, Richard Haynes are our friends, and we talk often, and we love and adore them. Rich Haynes really was instrumental in trying to help to get a lot of the legal stuff in and help us to remind us like what was happening on the day. To be honest, though, what Lee has really kind of like expertly done in the casting of this is that, you know, before there was a movie, it was this play, and it was a published play. And the idea is that for the majority of these characters, what Lee has done is, because the transcripts speak for themselves, it could actually be played by anybody. Like you see we got the best actors to play these parts. But the hope is that, Richard Haynes is a white Jewish man. A white Jewish man in the future should play this part. Do you know what I mean? And the reason is because the transcripts speak towards what the truth is more than how you play the character in a way. It's funny, you were using the word mundane. I think what Lee has also done is, there's that moment in the movie where all of a sudden she's crying. And they're like, would you like to have a tissue? And the judge is saying, hey, no, just give her a moment or something like that. Mm-hmm. You can imagine then when reading that, it's like, oh my gosh, how cruel is this person? But then when we went to the day to go to all those trials, and you start realizing it's not that it's cruelty, it's actually exhaustion, meaning every person is going up there and fighting for their life, and every person is bawling and crying, and like doctors that see blood every day, they're desensitized by that, which is probably more important than anything else, because it damns the system. It shows you that a system that can go like this, there are cases probably happening today in New York and Chicago where there's like 7 trials that are happening at the same time. They come up, they all have the same thing, they all get to speak for a moment, and they all get a sentence, like right then and there. Like anyway, I say all this to say is that the transcripts really tell the character who they are, and the person that's playing this character, whether it's Marsha Stephanie Blake or Kathy Chalfant, can come in and bring their own DNA, into this to this world. And I don't know if I'm giving an explanation for it, but I really feel like the DNA of the person is what's bringing to so much of it, and then Lee's expertise directing, making sure that it's not turning into, a Law and Order or something.
Right. And Lee, did you make a conscious effort to cast outside of the gender norms, or was it just truly who was the best part? Who was the best for the role? Because I thought Linda Powell was incredible. I could feel the trepidation, I could feel the anxiety, and I could feel like it was actually happening, especially when she was doing the Seventh Circuit court and she was a little bit stumbling a little bit. It just felt so real. And I honestly couldn't see anybody else playing that role, regardless of gender. So did you just go for it when she came in and read, or did you have an idea about doing that beforehand?
It was a kind of combination of 2 things. And one was like an idea, again, connected to this question of how do we create small conventional ideas, like conventions, storytelling conventions in the film that help the audience have the experience of these as transcripts. So when we were doing the theater production, there was something about, it's actually Linda Powell, Marsha Stephanie Blake, that judge is originally a white man. And then also Frank Easterbrook, the head of the Seventh Circuit, is also a white man. And I felt like, it's interesting to take these 3 characters kind of as a trio. Although I think it kind of, you feel it most prominently because they keep referring to Linda's character as Mr. Heinous, Mr. Heinous, Mr. Heinous. So you feel it most strongly with Linda's character, but take those 3 characters who are kind of, in these interesting positions of like authority, and they have this really interesting relationship to the law. And by flipping the genders, creating these tiny little moments of dissonance that remind the audience that no words have been changed. And, we're so deep in this complicated moment in our culture and our politics about like, what is truth? Am I being manipulated? What is politically convenient for people to tell me that might obscure something that's more complicated? And I think that we wanted the transcripts to be this kind of like lifeline to reaching people beyond like folks who might like identify with us politically. And so we wanted to like really highlight that these are transcripts. We did not make this up. And we did not change it to make it more palatable. And so the hope was that those little moments of dissonance would help us achieve that much bigger thing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, when Arian and I were workshopping this, we were like, what are we doing? Like, this is so complicated. Is it too dry? Like, the legal arguments are complicated to follow. And so we knew that we needed an actor who could not only have this like really interesting emotional relationship to the law that's very specific and kind of like an unconventional place for the emotion to live in a role, but also like make sense of the ideas and the text and the language. And I knew from working with Linda Powell, like she's a long time, I've been an admirer of hers for many years and have worked with her in various capacities. And so I knew that she could do it. So it was both things.
She was incredible. I was immediately connected to her. I just felt her passion, her trepidation, her empathy for Elizabeth. Arian, the lawsuit of which the film is based on was so groundbreaking that voter registration laws were changed in 7 states. The courtroom shows how black and white the law can be, but also that there's a gray area for interpretation. Is it your hope that this language that was adopted in those states be adopted in all 50 states? And how, as viewers, can we make that happen? Because I think it's so important. Any tips? Any ideas? Besides voting?
Yeah, I mean, I hope, I really hope that, yeah, I do hope that it's all in 50. I hope that people see this story, and I hope that they see that Richard Haynes had everything going against him, and within a system that doesn't work, really, that's really backlogged, that's death penalty cases in DMV settings, and a lawyer like Richard Haynes can fight so hard to go all the way to the top that only in a country like America can something like this go, and where you can actually fight it. And we just need more of these types of folks. So I hope, in a way, not only do I hope that this, yes, changes laws moving forward, but I also hope that it changes how we view the immigration court system. I hope that we do change the immigration court system. Lee's got some actual things that we can actually go after that I'm sure she'll tell you about. But also the last thing I want to say about this before I hand it over to Lee is to say that there's real opportunity for us as a society. I'm going to get deep here, but there's real opportunity for us as a society to really come together and fight for the things that we know are unjust and work together to fix those things. And it takes courage, and it takes a lot of no's, and it takes years. I mean, that's the other thing. This took years for this to happen. But if we can fight in that world and live in a world that does that kind of like work, I really truly believe that people can kind of make, leave this world a little bit better than the way we found it.
I think that's the point of this film, and I certainly left me with a feeling of anger, a feeling of shame, but also a feeling of hope. And I hope that the rest of the viewers feel that as well. I have to ask one more question, Arian, because my Succession fans would be livid if I did not. I have a lot of them. You're gearing up to go back to work for season 4. When we last saw Stewie, he landed himself a board seat at the shareholders vote. What do you think his reaction is going to be when he finds out his pal Kendall and the Roy children are they got booted out of the merger in this new Waystar Gojo deal?
How do I answer that? I think there's some there's some evidence at the end of season 3 when they're all meeting and Stewie and Sandy with an eye figure out that they're going to do this merger that's happening. And it seems like Stewie's really kind of game for it. That's what I will say. It seems like Stewie really kind of likes it more than Sandy with an eye does. And I'm intrigued where that goes.
Well, the fans are always intrigued.
I'm sticking to it.
The fans are always intrigued. Well,